So they've gone from here to here and to today, where they no longer repeat and say that rail will reduce traffic congestion, but they did it in the past. And some of these emails, I think, seem to support them. These emails to me clearly support that they were rushing the project along in 2006 and thereafter. And of course, we know that there was an election in 2008, I believe, right? And when was the vote on the rail issue? Was it 2008? Okay. And so, you can read what you want into these things. I know what they mean to me, but I'll leave it to you and your imagination to think about what it may mean.
Governor, with the recent approvals, final design, the letter of no prejudice, doesn't that suggest that these concerns, whatever concerns FTA had, have been resolved?
In what sense?
Well, I mean, if you're going to give them permission to spend money and to move forward with the project, doesn't that suggest that the FTA is comfortable with what the city is doing?
Okay, I'm going to get back to this online news already, because they got the story right. Okay. Basically, FTA, in my view, issued that letter of no prejudice because the city would have been subjected to these fines for being unable to start on maybe a monthly basis or whatever the contract provides. And so I think they went to the FTA and said, you got to help us out. And so what did the letter of no prejudice say? What did it mean? All it meant, it didn't mean that the FTA has given the green light. All it means is that the FTA has said to the city, if you want to spend your own money, you can go ahead, okay? But we're not putting any money into the project until we have a full funding agreement and we reach an agreement on those conditions. So, this thing is all messed up. This is the most mismanaged project that I've ever seen in my 28 years in public office. And I think the only reason why this thing is still alive and has not been rejected by the FDA is because of a very, very powerful senator who sits on the appropriations, who chairs the appropriations committee. With that kind of pressure, these guys would do anything.
But following up on that, wouldn't it, if the FTA does give the letter of no prejudice and kind of start to give the approvals, wouldn't that then make it more of the FTA's problem as well? I mean, in these emails, they say it's the city's problem. Let them deal with it, but doesn't some of the accountability now start to come to the FTA if they start, approving this thing?
I don't understand your question.
Don't they make it if they're saying it's the city's problem, let them deal with it and saying all these problems that the city's going through, but then yet they turn around to that question and approve the letter of no prejudice and start signing off on things. Doesn't that now, some of the accountability now come to the FTA as well? I mean, now they're starting to get involved with the problem if it isn't the problem.
Well, the FDA did a couple things that I think they can truly be held accountable for. One is that they gave the go-ahead to relocate utilities. But when they issued the letter of no prejudice, it didn't mean that they were going to be responsible for these guys digging holes in the middle of the highway and putting up columns. They basically say to the city, you spend that money, city money, not federal money. And by the way, with respect to our lawsuit, when we're thinking about maybe bringing an injunction, the city agreed and told the judge that if the case went against them, they would restore whatever they did. If they dug a hole, they would cover it up. The problem with that kind of thinking, it just shows how reckless these people are. Because in order to do that, they'd have to do it with taxpayers' money. And that's why I said that one of the things that I would do if I'm mayor is to hold these people accountable. Because I think what's happened is malfeasance. They have a fiduciary duty to the people of this state, this city, and they have clearly breached it. No reasonable person in my mind would ever give contracts for which there really is no money. You try doing that, you try to write a check and you don't have money in the bank account. Peter Carla used to prosecute people like that. You know, what the hell's the difference? Excuse my language.
Governor, with the lawsuit, how long were you folks seeking the administrative record? How many months of a delay was it? And did you get an explanation of it as to why the delay?
We were delayed time and time again. And it's interesting that the mayor has been on record, in fact, I think Malia's program, as saying that, accusing us of delaying the lawsuit. Now, why should we do that? We don't have an endless pot of money like they do. Taxpayers, $5 million or whatever it is. We got to go out and raise money from the private sector. We wanted this lawsuit expedited and resolved as soon as possible. So they were the ones who delayed. They filed motions which were denied, motions that we considered. Judge Heen and I are both lawyers, and our lawyers considered frivolous. And apparently the court considered it frivolous also because they denied the motion. Every time they've gone to court to get something, they've lost. You know, that's what insurance companies used to do to my clients when I was a practicing attorney. Any other questions?
Go ahead.
I was just thinking if Walter could put on his judge cap real quick and maybe give some insight of how a judge would look at this evidence. You know, I'm kind of asking you to look in your crystal ball a little bit, but what would a judge consider, you know, looking at these emails, you think?
Well, the judge would look at it very fairly to begin with. But you had to examine into every little bit of justification that's been put forth by the city for the conclusions stated in the record. And unless the judge finds those satisfactory support for the conclusions in the record, he would throw it out.
You know, if you guys look hard enough, you're going to find proof, I think, that the city has been deliberately, for one thing, rushing the awarding of contracts, as Mr. Horner, I was told one of the reporters, they, meaning us, going to have a hard time putting the genie back in the bottle. It's a heck of an attitude for a banker to take with public money. And then there's a statement by Carrie Okinaga. You may recall that she said something like, and I'm paraphrasing, but you guys can look it up, something like, well, I hope the court will take into account the fact that we spent $300 million to study this thing. The court, if the court does its job, will rule according to law. And as an attorney, Ms. Okinaga should know that you can't bully the court into making a decision by doing those kind of things.
I was just wondering if you have any final challenges or thoughts to Mayor Carlisle that you want us to challenge him on.
Well, I'd like Mayor Carlisle, Kurt Caldwell, Dan Inouye, and all of those folks who support rail to explain to the public why is it reasonable to issue contracts when you don't have a full funding agreement. I would like Dan Inouye to explain to the people that if he doesn't get the $1.5 billion from Congress, and with that line starting from an empty field near Kapolei, and they run out of money in Waipahu, what's going to happen? I've asked this question many times, as you folks may know. Neither the senator, the mayor, or Kurt Caldwell has ever answered that question. And I think the people deserve an answer to that question.
Governor, what have you been telling, especially folks on the west side, about how we solve this traffic problem if rail doesn't go through?
I basically tell them, first of all, we're working on a plan, okay? And I have Professor Providaros and former Director of Transportation Honolulu, Haraga, and Sam Kaleo, who is the city's Director of Transportation, working with me. And our plan is comprehensive, but at the core of it is a bus rapid transit system. Now, you know, I've heard that some people, including one person here, has has questioned, well, where are the specifics? So let me answer him right now. The specifics are in a plan approved in the year 2000 by the very same company that's doing the rail system now, Parsons Brinkhoff. In 2000, Parsons Brinkhoff did an alternative analysis study. They compared rail, they compared BRT, they compared other systems. And they concluded that bus rapid transit was the most cost-effective because it cost a fraction of the cost of rail, and because it could deliver about the same level of services. In fact, I am told that the bus ridership forecast is a little higher than the forecast for rail. Now that's where we're going to start, because there were some issues with bus BRT, and namely they had to do with the downtown part. But the point I think that everybody should be taken into account is why didn't they work on that? Because people approved the regional side. So why didn't they work on that? Why didn't they consider alternatives instead of running the line down Kapiolani? Maybe looking at running it down Veritania or someplace like that. That's what we're going to do. We have the best bus system in the nation. We're ranked #1 in terms of ridership and all that. My view is that the first step, before you consider something as expensive as rail, is to improve the bus system. And so I've said that. And you can do that as well by including other kinds of things. Starting classes at university at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock. Things like that that don't cost a lot of money, non-comprehensively will affect traffic. That's where we're coming from. And when I go out into Kapolei, which I am going to, Mililani, and the whole West Oahu area, and those people know me because I represented West Oahu for years, and I lived there for 22 years, so I know what the traffic is like. We will provide these alternatives, these proposals to them.
How much will that cost, and how are you going to pay for it?
It was hard for me to answer this question from this guy. We don't have a figure right now, but the BRT system was supposed to cost $1 billion, if I recall correctly. So if we come up with a system that is less or more, it's far cheaper than rail.
Can you use the same funding source, the GET? I thought that was specifically not for expansions of existing
Right.
systems.
I would have to go to the legislature and ask them to revise the law, and I think I made my point as to what I would propose. I would propose to them a deal that, I hate to use this line, but it'll be an offer that they can't refuse, because basically it will leave the state with at least $1 billion for their own use. Finally, let me kind of wrap this up by saying my opposition, including the blogger who's here today, has tried to paint me as a single issue candidate. People who say that don't understand how budgeting works or how government works. The rail project is like an elephant in the room. If you don't notice it, then you shouldn't be in the business of governing anything, okay? Already in the city's own budget, recently passed, the mayor has cut out funding for police and for fire and for other services, which in my opinion are important. If I recall, one appropriation that he cut out had to do with the purchase of new radios, those kind of things are important, but now they're beginning to suffer because next week we will hold a press conference again, and I'm going to have my truth squad here. And I'll have Malcolm Tom and Toy Ari, both, Toy was a director of finance for Frank Fossey, Malcolm, managing director for Jeremy Harris, explain the budget to you guys and show how they have absolutely no room to expand. That if this system runs into trouble, they're going to have problems, getting financing. Now, I know that the mayor has this credit card, this line of credit, which is basically a credit card. But in the end, somebody has to pay for it. And it's not going to be the media. It's going to be the taxpayer. So next week, we'll have that information for you. And, you're all invited to come here again, listen to